Welcome to the Freight Project podcast, brought to you by Cerasis, a North American third-party logistics company providing shippers transportation management, technology, and solutions.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Freight Project podcast. On today's podcast episode, Cerasis welcomes Todd Hockenberry, founder and CEO of Top Line Results, a marketing company focused on the industrial space. Todd is also author of the new book, Inbound Organization: How to Build and Strengthen Your Company's Future Using Inbound Principles. Make sure to check it out on Amazon, as he's featured Cerasis in the book as an example of a company who has become an inbound organization through our inbound marketing program. On this episode of the Freight Project podcast, Todd and I will first define what is an inbound organization. Then we will talk about how the initial steps of becoming an inbound organization starts with culture and mindset, and how the organization interacts with customers all the way through the buying cycle, especially as the mantra of business today is to provide the best possible customer experience. Todd and I will then expand upon culture and mindset and talk about how vital it is that your company's mission is customer-focused, and how you build your internal systems, especially your content marketing and customer service teams, to match that customer-focused mission. We'll conclude our conversation by Todd giving an example of a client he's worked with whom is now an inbound organization. It's a story of how a prospect for the company did all of his research online reading and researching the company through the company's developed content and published content. Todd will expand on how this means that the sales process is now almost invisible, and the role of a salesperson is shifting from one of convincing and informing to that of nurturing a relationship through the buying cycle, providing the best experience to the prospect and eventual customer the entire way. We hope you enjoy this episode of the Freight Project podcast. And welcome back to another episode. We have Todd Hockenberry with us as a guest on the Freight Project podcast. He's from Top Line Results. Now, just for our listeners, you may have seen Todd around before, the Cerasis Freight Institute and our blog. We've done a webinar together. We have had Todd be a guest contributor to the blog with some great content and focusing on how manufacturers can really think about inbound marketing and the inbound organization mindset in order to grow their business and attract new eyeballs to their company. So Todd, speaking of inbound organization, not only have you been a blog contributor, not only have we done a webinar together, but you actually wrote a book that includes Cerasis in it called Inbound Organization. So tell us a little bit about, who you are, what you do, and about your new book, Inbound Organization.
Thank you for having me on the podcast, Adam. Thank you for that introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here. I have been in the manufacturing industrial space for over 30 years now, which is kind of hard to say, but because it doesn't feel that long. And
time flies when you're having fun, man.
Yeah, it does. It does. And we definitely have fun with it. So Top Line Results is our consulting business where we work with industrial manufacturing and B2B companies and help them. Essentially, the big thing we focus on recently has been helping them understand how to change their business to adapt to the changes that their buyers are adopting and how they buy. So we're helping them really connect with the modern buyer, which clearly a lot of that's digital, it's inbound marketing, but it's also social media, email, and a lot of it even gets back to the business itself. And that's kind of the heart of what an inbound organization is. And that's where the book came from. It was from our consulting in the field with people and realizing that companies, if they really want to adopt the strategies and ideas and be successful with the modern buyer and compete online and attract buyers online and use content to help facilitate moving through the buyer journey and really helping salespeople be more modern salespeople and use modern tools, that the real change had to start at the organizational level with the mindset and your mission, culture, things like that, and then adopting the principles through your marketing and sales departments and service too. That's where they were companies that were really successful with. That's the model they were adopting. So what we wrote about was how companies do that, and your company was a great example of that. So thanks again to everybody at Cerasis for contributing. It was a great story, but there's lots of other stories in there, different types of companies. But the principles and the ideas and the process, there's a lot of commonality. So that's what the book is. It's kind of a guide, a rail, roadmap kind of thing for business owners and leaders and managers to look at, adopt, refer to, and then start to implement these ideas across the organization. And what's been fun about it was that there was some surprises we learned, some interesting kind of new ideas around how to market and sell a business. And the fun part about it is it's always kind of what I've always believed is sales and marketing. It's really become primary for everybody. And that is, it's about helping people first. It's about really understanding your customers, their point of view, being very empathetic. So it's all the kind of stuff I've always loved to do as a marketer. And actually, frankly, as a person, that's the kind of person I want to be. So it's really a lot of fun to kind of share these ideas and work with companies to help them implement them so they can really grow their business and hit their goals.
Well, that's interesting, right? So I'm glad you hit on being a good person. We've had several guests on the podcast, who are in the industry themselves. There may be technology providers or just having worked in some capacity in the world of freight and logistics, helping manufacturers become more efficient in shipping freight. And so what we're hearing on that side of how to do business and how to thrive and survive in the current market forces we're seeing, thanks to what we call in the industry a capacity crunch, is that technology is truly allowing you to be more strategic and bring in that human aspect of doing business again. It all seems like common sense. It seems like the golden rule, right? We should do unto others as we want to do unto us. But we've become sort of a world where we treat service providers as commodities sometimes. But that seems to be changing, right? The mantra in business today is customer experience. It is speaking directly to the customer and caring about what they have to say, as them being a true paid attention to constituent, that we're truly working for the people. And inherent in that change, however, is a resistance to change. And that's a culture thing, right? And I think that's what your book touches on. So how do business owners and the people you're working with, how are they adopting this inbound organization mindset? How are they getting started with that change?
There's a bunch of stuff in there, and that was all great. There was a quote you gave us for the book that I want to share with your audience because I think it was so powerful and it touches on most of the things you just hit on. And the quote you gave us for the book was, "What stood out for us and still does is our reputation as a thought leader in our space, our value-added relationships with everyone in our ecosystem, and the superior customer experience we deliver. These are now our competitive advantages." That's core thinking for an inbound organization. And where that comes from is if you think about how you buy as an individual and think about all the experiences you have daily with service providers, companies, manufacturers, apps, whatever it is, think about the ones that stand out to you. Think about the brands and the companies you love. They're the ones that create this kind of light, interesting, fun, helpful experience, and not the ones that put you on hold for 10 minutes, bounce you around 7 places before you get to the answer, don't follow up, don't answer your calls. I'll give you an example. I've got some countertops in my house, just kind of a random thing. We need to get some stains removed from them. And I called 2 different companies to try to get them to show up and help us. And they just ignored me. They didn't respond. I mean, I will never call them again. I will check them off my list. As a matter of fact, they're on my naughty list. I will remember that they were not helpful, and I will make sure I never call them again. And that's the point, right? The point is buyers, when you don't treat us that way, that we can change. We can find another alternative so fast. It's a click away. It's a mouse click away. It's pick up your phone and find 30 different options away. That's the world we all live in. And B2B companies, manufacturers, shippers, industrial companies, I don't care who it is. If you don't think your buyers are thinking that way, then I think you're in for a big surprise. So that experience then, tying it back to your quote, when you recognize that and you have a mindset across your entire organization that says this is the way the world is now, and every single decision we make, every dollar we spend on building our company is going to be focused on thinking about that customer experience and what they want. So if you do it like Cerasis does, you have exactly what you said. You have a competitive advantage. And most leaders think about competitive advantage in terms of product positioning or maybe pricing, or maybe, it's technological features. You look at that in classic things, maybe a distribution strategy, right? You think of lots of different types of strategies, and those things are still valid. But if you miss the customer experience piece, right, you lose them. You're gone. They're out, right? People aren't going to tolerate bad service or a bad experience, period. So this, to me, and what we wrote about was that this thinking has to be elevated to the top of the list for most businesses, if not all businesses. And it's got to be right there at the table when they're talking strategy with boards, owners, leaders, managers. They have to be thinking this way, because if they aren't, you could have the best product, you could have the best pricing, but if you don't have that experience, you're done. So I'll pay more for a better experience. Most people will. I'll go out of my way to replace a vendor or somebody I've worked with who's no longer taking care of me, because I always have options. So inbound organization is about understanding that's the world we're in and that they need to change. So to start, you really have to do kind of an assessment. You've got to kind of understand where you're at and think about this from that perspective, from an inbound perspective. How do people view your company? How do they experience everybody in your company across all departments? Is your accounting department helpful? Do you make it easy for people to pay you? I'm shocked at how often I run into that scenario where it's hard to pay people. And how ridiculous is that? Or are your terms and conditions or contract language, or is it onerous and 40 pages and nobody reads it and difficult, right? Are those things built from the customer's perspective, or to satisfy, a lawyer or your internal process or a bureaucracy or habit? We've always done it this way. So number one is you got to do an assessment. You got to kind of look at yourself. And sometimes getting somebody from the outside to look is a great idea. Sometimes shopping yourself is the way to look. But I also tell people a really quick and dirty way to do this. Look at your website. And tell me, well, not me, you could tell me that. I would be happy to have this conversation with anyone, but tell yourself, who is this for? Is the language on my website about me, my company, my products, my features, or is it about them? Am I talking about what their problems are, their issues, their goals, their aspirations, their fears, their risks? That's the number one easiest, fast, quick, and dirty test. And if your marketing website, if your collateral, if your language is about you and about features, benefits, specs, then you need to go back and think it through again, because your mindset's wrong, right? So that's where we want to start. And then great inbound companies all have a number of things in common, but one thing they all have in common is they have a really good mission, that they spend time on understanding what a good mission is, and one that's customer focused, about why they're doing things, about what the outcomes the customers are going to get if they work with them. But it's a really clear mission that people can not only rally around, they can be inspired by, but it can also inform people every day when they're making decisions with customers out in the field, that they know what the right decision is. They show good judgment. They know what their expectations are, and they can execute against the mission to try to help people achieve what you want them to achieve. And again, I see this all the time. I see so many missions that were companies that it's just marketing gobbledygook. It's up on the wall. Nobody ever looks at it. It's full of words like best practices and world class, and we're customer focused. And those words don't mean anything, right? You need to be very specific about who you help and how you help them. That's a good mission. And once you get that going, now you can start to work into your culture, and you can start to build that environment and the structure and the processes and tools, and build transparency, and again, mention decision-making. You can start building all the things that go into your culture that enable and empower your people to deliver that great experience that your customers want. There is no way to have a great experience as a customer if your culture isn't positive and customer-oriented. It doesn't work. You can't have a room full of cold callers that are miserable because all they care about is hitting their 120 calls a day number, and not whether they're actually helping people on the phone. That's not going to work. Your culture has to you have to deliver that kind of an employee experience that's similar to the buyer experience. The employees have to be connected to the mission, empowered. They have to have a sense of purpose, and they have to be connected. They have to have good resources. They have to have a light management touch. I'm hitting on a lot of things of culture, but these are the kind of characteristics we see on inbound companies that are successful. So you assess, you create a mission, you focus. Now you start building a culture that understands what customers want and can deliver it. And now you start to build your strategies. How do we map our customer experience to know what it is now and how we can improve it? How do we focus on building kind of things like personas where we target our market? We're not going to try to be everything to everybody, but we're going to focus. We're going to create content. How does the content we create, how do consumers use it? How do buyers want it? How, when, where, what format? Now you start to build strategies around engaging, sales processes, methodologies, right? It starts to inform everything you do from a strategic perspective. And I'm not discounting product or service. Those are very important too, but they have to be the context of creating new technologies, products, or services has to be wrapped up and around how can they help our customers solve their problems, achieve their goals while giving them a great experience, right? So that's the kind of order you're going to go through. We see a lot of companies want to do it backwards. They want to say, oh, I want to adopt this tactic. That'll help me be inbound. Well, it might help you if you start blogging. If you weren't blogging, okay, you might see some success. You might get some new visits. You might get some leads. But unless you know who it's for and what they want to talk about and the problems they want to solve and what they want to read about, chances are you won't see a lot of success up front, and then you'll drop it and move on to the next tactic. That's the opposite of what an inbound organization is going to do. You're going to think about it from the top first and work your way down to those tactics. So that's how we would implement it.
So you're saying it's not
easy,
haphazard,
right?
And these things happen successfully when you have intent, purpose, and strategy, right? And I think that's the key. You've got to tie all these things together, and leaders need to be involved in that process in order to create adoption company-wide. They have to reinforce it. So just to mirror everything you said to what we practice here at Cerasis. We don't just have an inbound organization. We are an inbound organization. So what did Todd. Todd said what I actually combined I tried to combine your last names into one word. So I kind of ended up calling you Scott.
You know what's interesting, Adam? This is interesting. People all my life have called me Scott, and I think in the human brain, those two names are stored.
I think you're right. And then your last name being Huck, it just kind of all goes together. But you had mentioned, taking a look at your personas and your strategy and making sure everybody at the company understood your mission. We're so ingrained in that not only do we have our core values, one of those being continuous improvement of our people, processes, and technology, but that is on everybody's desktop. It's taped on the windows of all the bathrooms or the mirrors of all the bathrooms. We even have, sessions 2 times a year to reinforce that. When we look at our website copy, which we retooled this year, what we didn't do was speak to the problems of the customer or the prospect that might be looking at our solutions. We retooled that this year and put them front and center because our marketing was not matching actually how we did business. And unlike maybe some marketers who just go out there and start writing copy, it was very important for me to hear from every manager, leader, and employee at every level at this company. So I interviewed every single one of them to get what their perspective was of the problems our customers are facing. Because it's those frontline employees who hear it day in and day out and can tell you at the drop of a dime what those problems are. So all you have to do is respond to reality, bring back that human impact and putting humans at the heart of everything you do, not a terms and conditions, not a sales quota number. If you stop obsessing about things that are number crunching or don't really matter, and those become your mantra and not the people you're serving, a strange thing happens. You don't end up hitting your goals. But the less you think about those things and the more you think about putting your solutions and your customers' problems at the heart of what they need, then you magically start increasing revenue. It's a funny thing, right? So that's how it works.
It is a funny thing, right? Well, and it's interesting. We have a quote that we use a lot, and it's to do inbound, you have to be inbound. And where that comes from is that inbound is becoming less and less of a specific methodology, which is kind of a ground up approach, and more of a mindset, which is really a top down thinking. And inbound tactics still work. You can still create a blog and maybe just do it and be very narrow, and you would see some success. But the reality is that's not going to be enough as we move forward. Like you said, you might see some success, but you won't reach your ultimate goals. And the thing that's so important about it is that everybody has to be inbound. Everybody in the company has some connection to the customer and that customer experience. So everyone has to be involved. And if you drop the ball, if your marketing is great and your sales is awesome and you ship a product, you deliver it or install it and it's working great, and then